Hey everybody, here at BamaInsider.com. Tony and I decided to have a little fun today, so we're going to play a game of fact or fiction. So we're going to go through 5 questions and probably disagree a whole lot, which is, if y'all watched, is pretty normal for Tony and I. So Tony, the first question that we have is, will Alabama throw less without Tua Tagovailoa on the team? What do you say?
I say I say that's a fact, but I say it's barely a fact. I think there's a lot of people that think that Alabama is going to just transform its offense now that Mac Jones is behind center, and I just don't see that happening. I think it's going to be pretty similar. If you look at the stats, I have them right up here. Tua last season had 28 attempts per game. That's the most any Alabama quarterbacks has had under Saban, edging out Blake Sims, who was at 27.9. So basically the same there. And if you look at what Mac Jones had in his 4 starts, it was 24.5. That's also taken into account. One of his starts was against Western Carolina, where he only threw 12 passes. If you take that out, and so you go with 3 remaining starts, it's 28.67, which is actually higher than what Tagovailoa threw. I don't think Mac Jones is going to throw more passes than Tua did, or more passes per game. But I think he's going to throw his fair share of passes, and I think Alabama's offense is more or less going to be the same. The reason why I go fact is because I think if you take it from a literal sense, Alabama will throw a little bit less than they did last season, but it won't be too noticeable, I guess, if you're asking me.
Okay, so let me be clear, disagree with a lot you just said, but we agree on the answer. It is fact. Alabama's going to throw a lot less without Tua on the team.
They will
Not
throw
o-
less. I don't
yes,
know if
we
it'll be
agree
a
that
lot.
Alabama will throw less, but so that is a fact. But there's no way that it's even close. And Tony's numbers with Tua's attempts are a little misleading because Tua got hurt in 2 separate games that he left early. Tua's attempts in the games he didn't leave early are all the way up at 31.7 attempts. That's 5 more than Mac Jones had in the games that his 3 starts that aren't Western Carolina, which I think is a good thing to throw out. So yeah, I mean, I maybe Mac Jones throws it a little more, but you know, I don't think he's throwing it anywhere close to 30 times a game. Maybe he throws it 27, 28, and that doesn't sound like a big deal, but you play 13, 15 games, 3 or 4 passes a game adds up pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean it'll be less, and I think they'll get more carries and for the backs as well. But I don't see him going ground and pound. That's my whole thing. I think there's this misconception that Alabama is just going to totally ditch its offense and go back to you know just like system quarterback with a high pounding running game. I don't see that happening. There's still a lot of weapons, and the way that their offense kind of sets up, you can really spread out defenses, and so I just don't see them limiting themselves by doing that. I think if they're so versatile that if a team stacks the box, then they can throw, and if a team is just going to give Najee Harris running lanes, then of course they're going to take advantage of that. But I think it's going to look very similar, in my opinion, to last year.
You just hate Najee Harris, and that's okay, but we'll get there. So Tony, the next question, fact or fiction, Jalen Waddle will be Mac Jones' favorite receiver in 2020.
So when you look at the Auburn game, you say certainly, right? What I did was I tried to break down. I went through Mac Jones's, all 98 of his passes that he threw in his 4 starts, and looked who he was throwing to and the outcome of those passes. Um, to no surprise, Jerry Jeudy was actually his number 1 target last year. I think that's kind of obvious when you look at the kind of receiver Jerry Jeudy was. Devontae Smith was next with 22 targets. Jerry Jeudy, by the way, had 25. Henry Ruggs had 17 targets, and Jalen Waddle only had 11. That being said, Jalen Waddle only had 99 snaps during those 4 starts, and almost all the receivers ahead of him had double that amount of snaps. So, I mean, you look at it, when I'm looking at what Jalen Waddle and Mac Jones did, 11 targets, 10 completions, 215 yards, and 4 touchdowns. He had more touchdowns to Waddle than any other receiver. I think I love that connection. I think, now you're going to see Jalen Waddle break into the starting lineup. I think he's going to be Mac Jones's favorite receiver. I think that slot position, just those quick slants over the middle could really help get Mac Jones going in games. And I think that's going to be a connection you're going to need to, get used to hearing. I think the Auburn game is probably a really good indication of that.
So, Tony, you're saying fact?
I am saying fact. Yes, that was a long-winded way of saying fact.
I am happy to continue the streak of disagreement, and this time it is outright. That is fiction. You make a great point. Jalen Waddle wasn't on the field as much as Devontae Smith. Of course, he'll be on the field more next year, so he'll probably get more targets. That's all good. But you think just because he plays twice as many snaps, he's going to get twice as many targets? I think that's a little bit of a reach. Devontae Smith has already proven he has a rapport with Jones. Not that Waddle doesn't, but, he did get 22 targets. He was 3 behind Judy. And, I mean, when I just look at it, who are we talking about this offseason? I think Kyle's got, Kyle's looking for some way he can get some money in on Jalen Waddle to win the Heisman Trophy. We're talking him up in these videos, and we're writing about Waddle as the most exciting player in our countdown. When opponents play Alabama, who are they going to be thinking about? I think teams are going to come into it with they're either going to look at Najee, or I think they're going to look at Waddle, and they're going to try to take one or both of those guys away. And I think Devontae Smith is going to be the forgotten guy again. And we've seen when teams just kind of go, oh, yeah, it's just Devontae Smith. I mean, he balls out. So I'm confident that, this is fiction, and Devontae Smith will be the receiver Mac Jones goes to the most often.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I think obviously that's the other side to this. I think it's either going to be one of those two guys. If you look at the Auburn game, Devontae Smith was targeted 10 times, which more than any other receiver. Mm-hmm. He only had 5 catches, but, obviously Jones has looked at Devontae Smith a lot, especially in big games as well. The thing about it is just that success ratio for me with it's not so much the amount of snaps per targets. It's more just if you look at it, 10 completions on 11 targets, it seems like whenever Mac Jones throws to Jalen Waddle, good things happen. And I think as a quarterback, you kind of start – I'm not sure he's sitting here looking at this breakdown and saying, who should I throw to? But it gets in your head if every time you throw to a guy, something good happens. I mean, he threw to him 11 times, has 10 completions. 40% of those completions went for touchdowns. I mean, as a quarterback, that kind of gets in your head. And I think you probably – you subconsciously almost look for Waddle first.
Yeah, but I think defenses also will also take note of that, and they'll know that maybe Waddle comes out in the first 2 games. Yeah, he's the guy, but I think defenses are going to pay attention to Waddle. So I mean, at some point, I think Waddle's electric. I think he can beat two guys if he has to, but I think if Waddle's consistently, seeing a lot of coverage, Mac's going to go with the open guy, and Devontae Smith might be that guy more often. I also, if the question was, will Jalen Waddle have a better season, more yards, more touchdowns, I'd maybe take Waddle. But, we're just talking about who's Mac going to throw it at the most. And
so you're going to say that Devontae's going to have less yards and more targets?
I'm saying he might. I'm not saying Devontae Smith is a better receiver. I'm just saying I think Mac Jones is going to throw it his way a lot more.
All right.
So, question number 3. This is the most decisive question, and we've had at least a weekly debate about this, I feel like, since I got brought on back in February. The question is, does Najee Harris need more carries to be successful? And we're defining more as the workload he got down the stretch last season. So that's probably like 14 or more carries. And then the flip side is less, and 10, 12, 9 would have got the first 2.5 years.
Let's be clear about this question. Does he need this to be successful?
Yes.
That's the narrative that I've heard some around Najee Harris. I completely agree. This is the most passionate thing I am on this list. He does not need more carries to be successful. Stats will tell you that he does not need more carries to be successful. In the games that Najee Harris last season recorded 15 carries or less, he averaged 6.04 yards per carry. In the games he had 15 carries or more, he averaged 5.74 yards per carry. That's not a huge difference, but it also proves that he does not need more carries. In fact, he's slightly better when he has less carries. And if you look at 2018, when he had a career best 6.7 yards per carry, that was like one of his least amount of carries. I think he was averaging 7.8 carries a game. So this whole notion that, Najee Harris doesn't start working until like carry 5, I don't believe that. I mean, look at the LSU game. I think he busted a 31-yard run on his first carry of the game. So yes, he can wear down defenses, and yes, like it might make sense to give him the ball late in the game, especially if you're trying to grind out the clock. But the question is, does he need it? And absolutely not. He is just as good of a back at carry 1 as he is as carry 8 or 9.
Ooh, okay. So we're gonna split hairs here a little bit. I'm gonna say fact right off the bat, so everybody knows where I stand. If you've never watched me discuss Najee Harris before, then you should go back, because I've already said this. Najee Harris, I think he's going to set the all-time rushing record for the school. I think he's Alabama's best chance to win the Heisman Trophy. I'm all in on Najee Harris this year. We didn't talk about this before we started recording. I looked at games where he had 14 or more carries, and the difference in his average yards per carry in those games, which was 5 games last year, and then the other games was less than half a yard. He was less than half a yard difference. You obviously started 15 carries or more, so I think that's 2 games difference.
Yeah, it was less than half a yard for me as well.
I'm sorry, not half a yard. I'm saying half of a half a yard, a 1/100th. I found almost no change. You found something significant with the different games.
0.3.
Yeah. So. You can say that he doesn't need it, but forget all the numbers. Just watch Najee Harris. He looks completely different. Watch him in that LSU game. You talked about how he did in the first carry. That's great. Watch him in the third quarter. Watch him in the fourth quarter.
That's when they're starting to get in the ball.
He looks like a different back when he's got this workload. So I don't think Najee Harris is gonna. Yeah, if you give him 3 carries a game, he's probably going to average more yards per carry. But I don't see a huge difference between the Najee Harris that's getting 10 yards or 10 carries a game and 15, 20 carries per game. I think his yards per carry is going to be similar. I agree. But he's not going to score as often. And the plays that he makes when he's on the field for that long, he looks better as a blocker. He looks better as a receiver. He looks better as a runner. I feel like he looks more dynamic the longer he's out on the field. So from a numbers standpoint, I can point to that he has more touchdowns. And Tony, I'm sure that you'll argue the longer you're on the field, the more touchdowns you'll score.
Well, sure, yeah. I think the real point that should be made here is that I think one of us has a bigger belief in Najee Harris than the other, because I think he can be just as effective from carry number 1. I think maybe you don't feel that way.
I've seen backs before. I covered Florida State last year. I would argue the same thing for Cam Akers. I would certainly argue that for Derrick Henry back when I covered him at Alabama. Some backs just hit a groove the longer they're on the field, and I feel that way watching Najee Harris. So
if Najee Harris averaged 16.08 carries per game last year, how much should he get?
This is where we're splitting hairs. What's more successful? Would you rather average 8 yards a carry and finish with 50 yards every game and a touchdown, or would you rather have 3 touchdowns and 100 yards a game and average 2 yards less a carry? I mean, we're splitting hairs on what's more successful, but from his whole body of work, I think the Najee Harris that's on the field in the fourth quarter, that's already touched the ball 15 times and is just getting fed, looks more dominant and more explosive than the Najee Harris in the first half, or the Najee Harris that's closing out a game, getting his 6th touch.
I don't see a world where he gets too much, where he averages too much more than what he did last year. And I don't even know if he necessarily will average the 16 carries, just because there's so much talent on this roster and in this backfield. So I guess, the rationale behind my my statement there is that I don't think he's going to need it necessarily. I think he's going to put up similar numbers. If they play more games, I think he has a chance of breaking that record, like you said, and I think he can be a Heisman level back. But I don't know if you're going to see close to anywhere close to the number of carries that per se like a Derrick Henry got. I mean, because he got the ball a lot last year and he still averaged 16 carries. I know earlier in the season he didn't quite have it as much as he did late in the season, but I think you might be seeing around 16, 15 carries per game for Najee. And I don't think that's a bad number. I think it's obviously a number that we've seen him do a lot with.
Well, we agree with that. I think like I said, defining how many carries is more and what is successful is tough with this. The core of is, though, you think Najee Harris is going to be good no matter how many carries he gets. I think Najee Harris is going to be great because I do believe he gets more carries, and I think that matters.
That's fair.
So, let me calm down. Let me collect myself after defending Najee. The fourth question is, will Christian Barmore lead Alabama in sacks? And I'm going to start off, and I'm just going to say fact here. If you look at the Pro Football Focus numbers, I mean, smaller sample size, but Barmore was just easily one of the most successful defenders for the Crimson Tide last year. And just watching him, I think the LSU game comes to mind, but down the stretch, as he got more work, his Pro Football Focus grade didn't dip. His production increased a little bit to match the larger workload. And he just looked, he looked like he was sort of relishing and taking the most of an expanded role in the last 4 or 5 games. And, Alabama's other guys, whether they were young and thrust into a role or whether they were older and just kind of there, they looked like they were gassed. And I felt like Barmore showed he has a lot left to give.
Yeah, so I'm going to call myself out because earlier this spring, I was making bold predictions on the linebacker group, and I said Christopher Allen, would lead the team in sacks. After further evaluation, I think I was wrong. I mean, I don't want to call myself out before the season starts, but looking at the numbers and breaking things down and looking at the potential there and just going back and watching some games, it's really hard not to pick Christian Barmore here. Mm-hmm. The only thing is we haven't had too big of a sample size with him. But, I mean, if you look, he Pro Football Focus released something that said that, he had the highest pass rush win rate at 20.8%. That's among any defensive tackle in the nation. So, obviously, he's elite there. And if you look at history, will also tell you that Alabama – I know it didn't happen last year because Anthony Jennings led the team in sacks, but more often than not, the 4 years prior to that, it's been a defensive lineman. Mm-hmm. So I kind of see Christian Barmore having a season similar to what, Quinnen Williams had. I mean, obviously that's a crazy good season. I'm not sure he's going to match those numbers, but I think he can be that kind of disruptive guy on the defensive line that can get into the backfield a lot. I think you might see a guy like DJ Dale kind of take up some of the space and allow for Barmore to kind of get back in the backfield a little bit more. So things like that, I think you're going to see a big year for him. And then you got to look at it. There's not a lot of experience that Alabama returns that could get those sacks totals. So under further evaluation, I think that Christian Barmore is probably my pick. So I'm going to go big fact here.
Yeah. So Tony and I agree both in the answer, and we agree in everything Tony said is absolutely why I believe in Christian Barmore this year. One thing to note, I think we both kind of predict him blowing up a little bit like Quinnen Williams, but we would both say he's not quite there talent-wise yet. So I would say it is possible that maybe he has a good game week 2, week 3, and then maybe all of a sudden teams just make it a point to take him out of it the rest of the year.
The good news is that, Alabama will have, other options on the defensive line. I think, a healthy DJ Dale will be great. And then I also think, the return of LeBrian Ray will mean a lot as well. So it's not just going to be Christian Barmore. From Alabama's perspective, hopefully one of these young pass rushers at the outside linebacker position, they'll catch on as well, whether it be Christopher Allen, like I had projected, or King Makuta, or any one of those freshman pass rush that they brought in, William Anderson, Chris Braswell, Drew Sanders, Quindarius Robinson, somebody of that bunch, if somebody steps up too, they can also take away a lot of the pressure up front and really open up some opportunities for Barmore.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I agree with all that. It's a nice change of pace after the Najee debate, to agree. Okay, Tony, let's see if we'll agree on the last one. The last question is, is Alabama finally going to solve the kicking game woes? And we're not talking about a little better. Like, is this the year that I don't have to write a story about the kickers costing the team?
I think it might be. I think I'm pretty high on Will Reichert. If you look at his stats, the 4 of 7 on field goals, and then he missed an extra point. So you're kind of like, was it really that good? But I like him because he missed his first 2 kicks, and they were narrowly missed. And then he didn't let that get to him. I think a lot of kickers, after kind of starting so bad, and then, with the already pressure that Alabama's kicking position brings, I think you could see a lot of guys just totally melt. And we saw the next game, Reichert just came back and nailed his next 2 field goals. So I like him from a confidence standpoint. I think, he's a guy that would have probably solved it last year if he didn't suffer that hip flexor injury. It's all going to be, pretty much determined on how well he comes back from that. But if you look at it, I think he'll definitely make a difference in the actual place kicking game, and then definitely in the kickoff game. He's a much better kickoff guy, in my opinion, than Joseph Bulovas.
Mm-hmm.
You look at last year; he had recorded touchbacks on 75.86% of his kicks. Bulovas recorded touchbacks on 16.67. That's a huge difference right there in terms of just getting those touchbacks, which can be valuable in terms of field position, and then also, limiting big plays. So as far as just every aspect of the kicking game is concerned, I think that Reichert does make a difference. And I think Alabama could, I don't want to put it on. I haven't seen enough of Reichert to say that he's just going to be this all SEC type kicker, but I think you're going to finally maybe not have to worry about the kicking position more so than any other team. I don't think it's going to be a problem for Alabama. I'm not sure if it's going to be a strength yet, but I don't think it'll be a problem. Yeah,
and so first of all, I agree with Tony. Fact, I do think Alabama's kicking game is going to improve significantly. And Tony broke down the numbers and provided us all detail about the kickoffs, and there's a lot of people watching like, I do not care which one of them kicks it further down the field on kickoff, just make the field goals. But I think Tony's right. I think Will Reichert is the guy here. I think if you look back at the last 7 years, only one kicker has topped 75% of field goals, which is mind-boggling. And that was Joseph Bulovas, and he did it by never kicking long. In 2018, he all his kicks were, I think, inside 30 yards, inside 40 yards. His percentage was good, but we've seen enough of Bulovas that when he is asked to kick longer, he can do it, but not consistently, and that's what Alabama needs. One thing that I would like to note, Tony, you mentioned this. Reichert missed his first 2 kicks. I think it was 48 and 49 yards, so not easy.
Right, exactly.
His welcome to college football. You're on it. You're on TV. Playing in the Georgia Dome, or Mercedes-Benz Stadium, whatever. Kick this 48 and 49-yard field goal. Not an easy start for him. He missed those, but then drilled it from those exact 2 distances the very next week, which I think is just kind of incredible. And
he hit the post too. I mean, he's not like he just totally shanked these kicks.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right there, And if he makes those 2, right, then he's 5. Then he's 6 of 7. And I think at that point, we might not even be having this discussion because it might be an obvious. It might look a lot more obvious the fact that Alabama does have a kicker, because obviously 6 of 7 looks pretty good, especially with his kickoff ability as well. So we'll see what he can do over a full season, and really we'll see how he's able to recover from that injury, because that's a serious thing in itself.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's the biggest question mark. He was injured, he tried to come back, and he suffered another setback. I think that's the biggest thing. Can he come back from that, and will he look the same, and will he have the confidence in his leg that he needs? Because when you get down to kicking and punting and all this, timing and confidence is just matters a lot more than some of these other positions. So, does he have the confidence in his leg, and can he stay healthy throughout the season? If he takes any contact for whatever reason, or, if he slips in practice, walking on campus, in a game, does his leg hold up? And that's something we can't really account for. But, I mean, just watching the guy in the small sample size we got last year, we both agree. I think we have all the confidence that, he's got to be significantly better. I mean, topping 75% isn't a lot to ask for when you got to think Alabama's going to be kicking a fair amount close up.
Yeah, I mean, heck, it can't get too much worse. So, yeah, I'm expecting. I mean, look, if you look at last year, Alabama finished tied for 93rd in the nation, 66.7% on its field goals. It ranked 86 in the nation in extra points, and it had its lowest touchback percentage since 2014. So, I mean, not really high standards there for, I mean, it should be pretty easy to see improvement. So as long as Reichert doesn't just totally choke and not live up to, his potential, because let's remember, he's a really highly rated prospect. As long as he just doesn't live up to that at all, I think Alabama's going to see some improvement.
It couldn't get much worse. I think that's a good way to sum up Alabama's kicking game heading into 2020. So, first of all, if you're watching this video, I would love for y'all to go to the comment section and tell me how much y'all agree with me and how wrong Tony is on the 2 or 3 questions we disagreed on. So first of all, do that. Second, make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel or check out our website. But, third, if you could comment and just let us know, do you like watching this? And Tony will have a story. He'll spell out his arguments for all these guys. Do you like reading this content? It's kind of a different way that we can keep the conversation going in the off season. If y'all enjoy it, let us know and we'll keep doing it. And if you don't, Tony will stop, and that's fine.